The reaction from most people when they see this painting is, wow. What is it about some painting that makes people say wow? Of course, it's a highly subjective response and requires interpretation. So the word wow suggests to me a sense of awe, a connection to something beyond the ordinary, perhaps even to a sense of deep spiritual connection, rather than more emotive or negative emotional states such as grief or pain or fear, which tend to drag you down rather than uplift you. This particular image, entitled Joffield Whispers, is 120 centimetres square, so it's fairly large, and the colours are intense, bright oranges and yellow. Those colours can be quite overwhelming, but in this painting they're juxtaposed with the complementary colour to yellow, which is mauve, and that lovely soft colour affects it in two ways. When complementary colours are placed side by side, they create a vibrational effect, but at the same time they moderate one another, and that's enough to make this painting intense and soothing at the same time. The other aspect to Joffield Whispers is that mandalas generally have an expansive element to them. The linear movement outward from the centre creates that sense of space and timelessness. And for many people, whether they're conscious of it or not, there's a spiritual element to it. They feel they're connecting with the cosmos or with God. And since the subject of the painting is Archangel Jophiel, that's an appropriate response. What might wow paintings have in common? Do they all have something in common? Could it be size? Could it be choice of colour, subject matter, design, form? I'd like to share with you 5 paintings that to me have that wow factor, with no apology, fellow female artists and women in general, for the fact that these artists are all men. I've chosen these works because I've stood in front of each of them, with one exception. So I speak from personal experience. Clearly, a photograph isn't enough. And do bear in mind that we respond to visual stimuli in different ways. So this exploration requires an element of trust in my judgment on your part. So we're going to take a look at Snowstorm by the 19th century English painter JWM Turner. Then Melbourne, 1998, by the late Australian artist Jan Senbergs, followed by Blue Poles by the late American artist Jackson Pollock. Then A Bigger Grand Canyon by the late English artist David Hockney, followed by Ocean of Love by American artist Alex Gray. Now, all juxtaposed on a single page, it's difficult to see how the wow factor can apply, but bear with me, this is just for comparison. So what might be the common factor in these? 3 are larger than 3 metres wide. The other 2 are less than 120 centimetres maximum. So although they're not small images, they're not overly large either. So that's not a common denominator. If we look at colour, then 3 share intense reds and yellows and other colours, but the other 2 are quite subdued. So how about subject matter? Well, only one painting features the human form, 2 are landscapes, one is purely abstract and another semi-abstract, so that's not a common factor either. How about design? Well, to me this is the one area in which there's a commonality, and that is that in each of them there's a sense of being drawn in, of moving into another world beyond the canvas that we don't see in our everyday experience in the natural world. So going back to the Turner, this is entitled Snow and Storm, Steamboat off a Harbour's Mouth, and it's 91 by 122 centimetres. I saw this painting at the National Gallery in London probably 30 years ago, and remember being bowled over standing in front of Turner's works for the first time. He lived from 1775 to 1851, and at the time he executed this painting, photography had only just been invented, so there was no way a daguerreotype image requiring several minutes of exposure and dry conditions and still conditions could have been created at that early stage. Very few people would have experienced the wild conditions of its storm at sea, the feeling of being overwhelmed by natural forces that could bring such a sense of awe and awareness of how small and relatively powerless man is in the face of nature. So how could that experience be represented, except when you look at it in the way Turner did it? When you stand in front of it, there's a sense of being drawn into a vortex. The flecks of white paint swirling around feel like physical flakes of snow and sleet. It's palpable, caught up in the wild tempest. When you stand in front of this painting and shut out the world for a while, then the drama, the sense of danger and the fleeting nature of existence is palpable. He's literally creating a maelstrom on a flat surface so convincingly, one almost feels a degree of vertigo with the mast leaning over at a precarious angle and the dark red clouds swirling down from above, as though one is about to be caught up in the storm. All those flecks of paint seem to be applied in a circular clockwise fashion that give a sensation of listing to one side, being out of balance. The precociousness of Turner's style can be judged by the work of another giant of the art world at the time, John Constable, his greatest rival, whose bucolic landscapes in traditional style set a precedent for what was considered artistic excellence at the time. In an art world that required literal translation, he was a maverick. He loved the sea, and ships apparently went out to sea quite a lot, and the story goes that he had himself strapped to the mast of a steamer during a storm just for the experience. Apparently he got more than he bargained for, because at the time he didn't think he'd actually survive. He was a visionary artist, innovative and exciting for the times he lived in. Those of you who've watched some of my past videos will probably be sick of seeing blue poles, but really Jackson Pollock's work is so unique. It was visionary at the time. Nobody else thought of doing this that we know of, not in the public eye anyway. Blue poles is pretty big. It's 212.1 centimetres by 488.9 centimetres long. It's described as an example of action painting. The enamel and aluminium paint Pollock used has been distributed apparently randomly over the canvas. Photos of him depicting him literally throwing paint out of a large can at a huge canvas flat on his studio floor. Pollock was inspired by the work of fellow artist and his wife, Lee Krasner, an abstract expressionist, but he took her ideas to a new and highly individual level. This work is monumental in size and in bright colours, but that in itself doesn't give the wow factor. Researchers have analysed blue poles, and they've described it as an example of fractal geometry and as a reflection of chaos theory. Paint droplets exhibit similar patterns to those found in nature, which may contribute to the aesthetic pleasure for the viewer. For me, it's certainly part of the experience. When I stand in front of it in real time, I feel as though I'm faced with something profound, something beyond everyday experience, and it is very powerful. I visited it with friends who were art aficionados, and they didn't share the experience, dismissing it as trivial and meaningless. I don't know why. But I suspect if you approach artworks with preconceptions, then there is no room for an intuitive and honest response. If you approach the arts from an intellectual perspective, which they certainly did, then you'll see only what you want to see. But for me, there's a sense of excitement and awe being confronted by work that comes straight from the soul, from a deep place we all share at some level. Pollock had his demons. He drank heavily and in fact died quite young when he lost control at the steering wheel under the influence of alcohol in 1956. Those demons we all share at some level, but we live through them in different ways. For me, his painting was about the collective, about our shared humanity and our connection to the greater mystery of the cosmos and to our demons. If you ever visit Australia, You can see it firsthand at the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra. I assure you it's well worth the visit. David Hockney's Bigger Grand Canyon, also housed at the National Gallery of Australia, is another monumental work measuring 744.2 centimetres by 207 centimetres in a grid of 12.5 canvases, each painted from a different perspective and time of day. It so happens that Hockney passed away this week just short of his 89th birthday, the passing of a giant in the art world. When my late father saw this painting, his reaction was, "Wow, I've seen it in exactly those colours." So for him was quite profound, a wow moment. Hockney was initially a photographer, but felt that photographs couldn't capture the grandeur of the subject as well as the painting. As with Pollock's painting, it's not just the dimensions and colour that are so captivating, but the concept itself. I've said in a past video that I believe Cubism was the foundation of abstract art, and this painting is based on Cubist techniques and concepts. Cubism was about multiple viewpoints superimposed and overlapped to create a multi-dimensional effect, which is what Hockney did in Bigger Grand Canyon. He spent 15 years covering the subject, taking hundreds of photos from multiple viewpoints, which he assembled into composite images, later translated into paint. This creates an amazing sensation of depth and changing perspective if you give it time. If you stand at a certain distance from the painting, you get a three-dimensional effect, even a sense of vertigo. So one feels the enormous grandeur and elevation of the place. You can really feel you are there having a first-hand experience. The exciting thing is that if you start on one side of the painting, about 2 meters away from it, and walk across in front of it, looking at it, you literally feel as though you are walking along the canyon, because the perspective changes with each step you take. Each panel has a different perspective to the one you've left behind, and the eyes register those subtleties because we're hardwired to negotiate the physical world using perspective primarily. So it was a very clever and effective technique. In addition, you also find that from the left side, again because of the perspective, it appears that you're gazing across the peak in front of you and up through the right-hand end of the crevasse. If you go to the right-hand side, the opposite impression occurs. So there's this enormous feeling of depth and space that you don't see when you look at it as an image on the computer screen. It's a most extraordinary sensation when you're there. You really feel as though you are having the experience of being in a real place. The fact that the image is semi-abstract just adds to the thrill, because it feels so realistic, but it doesn't look realistic. It's quite extraordinary, and not only intellectually clever, but aesthetically profound as well. It can really take you on an exploratory journey. Wow, rest in peace, David Hockney. Alex Gray is the only one of these artists still alive and well. This is his Ocean of Love, which is 100 centimetres by 72 centimetres. Alex Gray is an American psychedelic artist who speaks on a whole different level. I look forward to the day I can experience his work in real time. This is the only painting I haven't actually seen myself, but I find even the digital images so powerful that they have the wow factor for me. I've never consumed psychedelic drugs personally, and I feel grateful to be able to witness the vision of another reality through the eyes and hand of this extraordinary artist, albeit second-hand. Gray's artistic style emerged from a combination of art school education, medical illustration training at Harvard Medical School, and psychedelic experiences with his wife and collaborator, Alison Gray. For some years, the couple practiced performance art about socio-political issues, some of which were pretty disturbing, but others were really transcending. The miracle is that Gray is able to translate his experience onto canvas in a way that's not only visually exciting, but it has a sense of the profound metaphysical, psychological, and spiritual realities beyond that which we experience in the 3D physical world. Most of Gray's paintings feature outward rays. And as I said at the beginning of this video, mandalas generally feature that linear movement outward from the center. It creates that sense of space and timelessness, and for many people, a sense of transcendence and connection to the spiritual realm. Certainly applies here. Even more miraculous is the attention to detail, the extraordinary complexity, the imagination that goes into everything Gray creates. For me, every one of his paintings has the wow factor, and although they have a look of pop culture about them, they need to be understood on an entirely different level because they reflect universal themes about the human experience and the desire for a spiritual connection that we all share, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. In a TED Talk from 2013, Gray said he wanted to create art about consciousness and that the body is the box that consciousness comes in. So he spent 5 years preparing bodies for dissection, and through that he appreciated the preciousness of body and soul. And that technical expertise is clearly evident in Ocean of Love. He also talked about psychic and spiritual energy systems dissolving into what he called the light body. In 1976, after taking a massive dose of LSD, he entered into what he describes as an infinite vista of toroidal fountains and balls of light. He said it felt that every being in the universe was one of these balls of light, like a cell in the body of God. And he felt that this was the reality behind the veil of the material world, that the light was love and connected us all. From that point on, the couple just wanted to create art about interconnectedness, and one feels that so profoundly in Ocean of Love. It's not just a sense that the souls are connected, that the two bodies are connected in a gesture that we would consider to be a loving gesture. It's much more than that. One senses that the souls are connected not just emotionally, but as a complete metaphysical experience of intertwining energy systems, almost as though the two organisms are one organism, and together they are in turn one with the cosmos. And I don't know, or want to know really, how he has managed to incorporate the vast blue of the ocean within that sphere. It's not background. In an ordinary tonal painting, the ocean would just be a background to the figures, but somehow the way he's painted it makes it part of the experience itself. It's almost as if you're not only going into an experience of light and love, but a deep emotional experience as well, the water just absorbing emotions of love. It's just a wonderful painting. Wow, wow, wow. And last but not least, Jan Senbergs, Melbourne, 1998 to 99. This painting is also pretty large, 344 centimetres wide by 140 high. Senbergs was a Latvian-born Australian artist, and he too sadly passed away recently in 2024. His technique has been described as industrial realism, which somehow doesn't describe the profound effect of his images on paper and canvas. The representation of the power of the city landscape and the forces that have created it, energy behind it, and the way in which he knits those forces together to give the overall sense of time and place. Senbergs isn't translating the scene literally, and the perspective is certainly distorted, but it's also taken from an unusual perspective because the main streets of Melbourne run north to south across the river, which in this painting would be right to left across the centre. So from this angle, the main centre of Melbourne is not only obscured, but the road would not be heading even in the direction implied here. So he's taken great liberties to great effect. Additionally, the viewpoint is taken not from the delicate, leafy, hilly eastern suburbs hinted at in the top right-hand corner, with the circular spire of the Arts Centre, Melbourne Cricket Ground, the Sydney Myer Outdoor Music Bowl, and the Yarra River heading up into the hills outside the city, but from the flat, dry, industrial western side, the air of which was thick with the smoke from the many factories in production until perhaps the 70s or 80s. It was once highly polluted. And although the river does curve slightly, it's exaggerated into a semicircle in this painting, into which is nestled the financial centre of the city. The elevated perspective gives a sense of drama, and the dramatic curve of the river creates a swirling effect that draws you into the image, a little bit like the Turner, but not quite so dramatic, while the skyscrapers reaching for the clouds add an almost Gothic religious element to it. Senbergs has also used multi-perspectives, which we saw in Hockney's work. We feel we're looking down on the closest skyscraper, while the two towers behind are viewed from a lower perspective, giving them an added sense of height as though you're looking up to them. While to the left, where the river broadens at the docklands, to which cargo ships have manoeuvred their way up the river and under the Westgate Bridge, it appears to drift off into the sky. In actuality, the whole city area is virtually flat, but in this painting it appears to be a swirling mass of hills and valleys, and yet it feels like Melbourne, with all its recognisable landscapes. The sense of it is that city. An important aspect of Melbourne is that it was built at the top end of Port Phillip Bay, which opens out onto the Southern Ocean and the world beyond, some 30 miles south of the city. So it's a major shipping port, and the broadening river in the painting seems to connect you to that world beyond. What's so powerful isn't just the scene itself, though, but Senbergs' unique signature, his energetic way of applying materials to canvas or paper. These are the impressions of an outsider, of someone coming from the cool wooded hills of a northern European landscape with its traditional culture and architecture, to a hot, dry, industrialized, harsh landscape of which he had no childhood memories and connection. And so his vision is detached and powerful. I haven't seen images with this power done by artists who've actually grown up in the country, because we have our attachments to the things we know in a place we know well. And when you stand in front of it, it does have that wow factor. So to finish off, in my opinion, male artists need to be in touch with their feminine aspect in order to connect with the viewer. But when it's combined with that masculine energy, that they often create works that don't just speak to us, they transform us in some way. They transform the way we see the world. And for me, all of these 5 artists do just that. The commonality they all share to me is originality, power, and the vision through which to make that manifest, the art of illusion. Thank you for joining me, and please remember to click the like button. I hope you'll visit me again. Stay well, stay blessed.